Hello to all. So this video is about the laboratory differential diagnosis of meningitis in CSF examination. So I would try to explain the differences between pyogenic meningitis, tubercular meningitis and aseptic meningitis on the basis of the CSF findings in these cases. So before going on to that, I would like to tell briefly about the CSF examination. So CSF is cerebrospinal fluid which is formed in the choroid plexus and it is present within the subarachnoid space surrounding the brain and spinal cord. It is formed by the ultrafiltration of plasma at a rate of 500 ml per day, and its function is to protect the brain and spinal cord and to supply nutrients to the brain and also to remove the metabolic waste. So regarding the physical characteristic of CSF, so volume is 140 to 170 ml in adults, while in neonates it is 10 to 60 milliliter, and it is colorless. In case of a traumatic tap, it is often red in color. So a question is often asked, what is the difference between subarachnoid hemorrhage and a traumatic tap? Because in both these cases, the CSF would be reddish in color. So these are the differences. In traumatic tap, clot may be present in the CSF which is obtained, while in subarachnoid hemorrhage there will be no clot. Secondly, we in CSF examination generally we take sample in 3 tubes. So hemorrhagic fluid is seen more in the initial tubes, while in the subsequent tubes it decreases. While in subarachnoid hemorrhage, the hemorrhagic fluid, the amount of that hemorrhagic fluid will be uniform in all the tubes. Now, lastly, there is no xanthochromia in case of traumatic tap in the initial 1 to 2 hours. That means if we centrifuge that CSF and we see the supernatant, it will be clear till 1 to 2 hours. After that, RBC lysis will occur and again we can see xanthochromia in the supernatant. While in case of subarachnoid hemorrhage, xanthochromia is seen after centrifugation since the RBC lysis has already occurred, and because of that the supernatant will be seen as yellowish red. And for seeing this difference we have to do the centrifugation within 1 to 2 hours, because after that both will show xanthochromia. Now next point is that the appearance is clear for a normal CSF, and CSF will be turbid if TLC is more than 200 cells per cubic millimeter, or RBC count is more than 400 per cubic millimeter, or if CSF protein level is also more than 150 milligram per deciliter. So in these cases the CSF appearance will be turbid. Now xanthochromia, as I already told you, is due to various conditions like hyperbilirubinemia, jaundice, subarachnoid hemorrhage, hyperkeratinemia, increased protein concentration in the CSF, in case of metastatic melanoma, or due to rifampicin intake. So in xanthochromia, basically the CSF after centrifugation, it appears pale pink to yellow in color. Now specific gravity normal is 1.003 to 1.008. Regarding the pressure of CSF, so normal opening adult pressure is 90 to 180 mm of water, and in infants and young children it is between 10 to 100 millimeter of water. Increased opening pressure, that is more than 250 mm of water, is seen in intracranial hypertension, and causes may be meningitis, intracranial hemorrhage and brain tumors. Now regarding the chemical composition of CSF, so these are the various constituents of a normal CSF. Most important are protein and glucose. So you need to know the values of normal protein in CSF, which is 15 to 45 milligram per deciliter, and normal glucose concentration of CSF, which is 50 to 80 milligram per deciliter. And these are the other constituents like urea, uric acid, creatinine, cholesterol, ammonia, sodium, potassium, chloride, magnesium, and the cellular components. Now next we come to the indications of CSF examination. So why we do CSF examination? So these are the indications. First is meningitis, which can be bacterial, tubercular, viral, fungal. Then meningoencephalitis, which is inflammation of both meninges as well as brain. Then third is encephalitis. In case of subarachnoid hemorrhage, then infiltrative lesions like leukemia and lymphomas and multiple sclerosis. There are certain therapeutic indications, like we can do this CSF tap for administration of medicines. Like in case of fungal meningitis, we inject amphotericin B, uh, and also drugs like anesthetic agents and anti-cancer drugs like methotrexate. So these can be introduced by means of lumbar puncture. So these are the therapeutic indications of lumbar puncture. Another indication of lumbar puncture is myelography, in which we introduce radio contrast media through the lumbar puncture. So these are the various indications of doing a lumbar puncture. Now next, the CSF examination done with the help of lumbar puncture. The needle is introduced between lumbar vertebra 3 and 4, and the needle that we use is known as lumbar puncture needle. Now complications of the lumbar puncture are pain, post lumbar puncture headache, or infection at the site. And the some contraindications are there like bleeding, diathesis, raised intracranial pressure. So this is the position for doing a lumbar puncture. Now, in case of CSF examination, which we do by the lumbar puncture, about 3 to 5 ml of CSF is collected in sterile plain tubes. And the first tube, the sample is taken for biochemistry, that is glucose, protein, and serology. In the second tube, the sample is taken for the microbiology, doing the gram staining, bacteria culture, sensitivity, because the first tube usually it is most contaminated. So we don't take the microbiology sample in the first tube. Similarly, the hematology sample are also taken in the later tubes to calculate the total cell count and differential count, because the last sample it is less hemorrhagic. So these are the 3 tubes which we take, and these are the tests which we perform in each of those tubes. Now total cell count it is done with the help of Neubauer's chamber, and the total count in case of adult is 0 to 5 cells per cubic millimeter, while in neonates it is 0 to 30 cells per cubic millimeter. In the differential cell count of CSF, normally lymphocytes are seen as the predominant cell type. Now we come to meningitis. So meningitis is an inflammatory process of the leptomeninges and CSF within the subarachnoid space, and it is usually caused by an infection. The symptoms of meningitis are fever, headache, altered sensorium, neck rigidity, photophobia, and vomiting. So there are certain types of meningitis. First is acute pyogenic meningitis, which has a bacterial cause. Then aseptic meningitis, which has a viral cause, and chronic meningitis, which is caused by bacteria called Mycobacterium tuberculosis. So aseptic meningitis, it is called so because when we do the culture of the CSF, in case of aseptic, there is no growth seen. So that's why it is called aseptic meningitis. Now, again in the Robbins 10th edition, these are the types of meningitis which are given and the causative agents. So acute pyogenic meningitis, I already told you that is caused by bacteria. So Escherichia coli or group B streptococci, Neisseria meningitis, Streptococcus pneumoniae, or Listeria. So these are the common causative agents in different age groups. Then chronic meningitis, it is caused by Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and the aseptic meningitis, it is caused by viruses like enterovirus, which is most common, and influenza species. Now this is the table stating the differences in the CSF examination of the various types of meningitis. So in case of acute pyogenic meningitis, the CSF appearance is turbid or cloudy or sometimes purulent. Normally, I told you that CSF is clear, but in acute pyogenic meningitis, it will be cloudy or even purulent. In chronic meningitis, which is generally caused by tuberculosis, So tuberculous meningitis, it has a clear or cloudy appearance, but sometimes it shows cobweb cogulum. So this cobweb cogulum is generally asked in Viva and also MCQs. So this appearance is like this. So it looks like a cobweb appearance, and it is characteristic feature for tubercular meningitis. While in case of viral meningitis, mostly the CSF is clear in appearance. Now next is the total leukocyte count and the differential count. So normal CSF count is less than 5 per microliter, and mostly it is composed of lymphocytes. While in acute pyogenic meningitis, it is the cell count is high and usually more than 1000 and mostly composed of neutrophils. In tubercular meningitis, the count is generally between 100 to 600 and mostly their lymphocytes are seen. In viral meningitis, the count is again increased, but to a lesser extent, that is between 10 to 300. And again, the predominant cells are lymphocytes. So we see that the predominant cells are lymphocytes in case of normal CSF, in tubercular meningitis and viral meningitis, while in case of pyogenic meningitis, it is predominant cells are neutrophils. Next, we come to the chemical examination. So the normal protein content of CSF is 15 to 45 milligram per deciliter. Now it is increased in case of acute pyogenic meningitis to a very high value, and it can be raised even up to 1500. Now in tubercular meningitis also the protein content is increased, but to a lesser extent as compared to acute pyogenic meningitis. So the values can be between 45 to 300 milligram per deciliter. And again, viral meningitis also the protein content is increased, but not to that extent like in the pyogenic meningitis. Now the glucose concentration in normal CSF is 45 to 80 milligram per deciliter. It is decreased. It is greatly decreased in case of acute pyogenic meningitis and tubercular meningitis. So values can be less than 40 milligram per deciliter in pyogenic, while between 10 to 45 in case of tubercular meningitis. And important point is that the glucose concentration will be normal in case of viral meningitis. Regarding the additional investigation, so in acute pyogenic meningitis, we can do gram staining and culture to demonstrate the causative bacteria. In tubercular meningitis, the commonly done AFB stain, the ZN stain for acid-fast bacilli, then culture to demonstrate Mycobacterium tuberculosis, and also PCR. In viral meningitis, PCR is used generally to demonstrate the causative organism. So these are the important differentiating points in the CSF examination of the various meningitis. So the most important points are that in pyogenic meningitis, the counts will be highly increased and predominant cells will be neutrophils, and appearance will be cloudy. The proteins will be increased and glucose will be greatly decreased. In tubercular meningitis, the cobweb cogulum will be seen in the gross examination. Counts are again increased, but to a lesser extent, and mostly lymphocytosis is seen. Again, proteins will be increased and glucose will be decreased. In viral meningitis, the CSF is mostly clear. The glucose content is also normal, but the count is again increased to a lesser extent as compared to tubercular meningitis, and the protein content will be increased. So these are the very important differences often asked in theory as well as Viva. These are few images. This is pyogenic meningitis, and we can see there is pus-like exudate which is seen on the surface of the brain. And in this picture, this is the cobweb cogulum. This is the lumbar puncture needle, and sometimes we do cytology of the CSF. And in this in this picture we are able to see the blast. These are the blast-like cells which have infiltrated in the CSF. So these are the large blast having large nucleus, fine chromatin, prominent nucleoli, and the scanty cytoplasm. So there is a cluster of myeloblasts seen in CSF. Now lastly, all tests can be done on the CSF. So routinely we do the opening pressure total cell count, that is WBC count, and the RBC, then differential cell count in a stained smear, then glucose and proteins. In glucose, we also find out the ratio between the CSF glucose and the plasma glucose. Usually, this ratio is about 0.6. Now, certain specific tests which are done in certain conditions are culture for bacteria, fungi, and Mycobacterium tuberculosis, then gram staining, acid fast staining, that is ZN stain, then test for fungal and bacterial antigens, polymerase chain reaction for tuberculosis and viruses demonstration, then cytology is sometimes done for the infiltrative diseases, then electrophoresis is done sometimes to determine the oligoclonal bands which are generally seen in case of multiple sclerosis or Guillain-Barré syndrome. Then sometimes CSF proteins, C-reactive proteins, beta amyloid, they are also detected. And lastly, VDRL test for syphilis can also be done on CSF. So these are the various tests which can be done on the CSF. So these are the more important ones, routine tests which we do, and these are done under certain conditions. These are the references. So thank you very much.